Republicans start to get a little antsy about some of these proposals. I'm speaking first this morning to Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I got so much to talk about. I don't know where to begin. Well, I do know where to begin. I want to talk to you, get your sentiments and feelings about the speech that the president gave to the joint session of Congress last week. Your takeaway for him.
Well, I think the president outlined his vision for the country and the issues that we're facing most acutely, from the economy to the border to the international crises around the globe. And what he's done in a very short period of time to tackle these issues and where we're going from here. And the work, obviously, that Congress is doing with respect to reconciliation, which will focus on a few key areas: border security, domestic production of energy, strengthening our military, providing middle-class tax relief, and reining in the size and scope of the federal government. And those, issues he spoke clearly about throughout the course of the speech.
What is the status of Congress doing that with about the money issue that Congress is going to deal with, and how long is it going to last, this discussion?
Well, we passed a budget resolution, which was the first step in the process. My Democratic colleagues are misleading and lying to people, saying that their Medicaid benefits were taken away, that we cut Social Security and Medicare. It's not true. The fact is that the budget resolution is the first step in the reconciliation process, and we will begin negotiating an actual bill that covers all of the areas that I just talked about, inclusive of lifting the cap on SALT, which is a top priority for me and for New York. We obviously pay among the highest taxes in America here in New York, and people need real tax relief, which is the primary function of what this bill is. With respect to Medicaid, I've been very clear. We're not cutting benefits from people who rely on these critical programs. We will, however, make sure that illegal immigrants and able-bodied adults are not scamming the system. New York has spent billions of dollars of taxpayer money to provide free housing, clothing, food, education, and health care to illegal immigrants, which, by the way, impacts the very social safety net that is necessary for American citizens all across this country. So as we deal with all of the challenges we're dealing with as a country, we have to be honest and realistic about the situation. We have a $7 trillion budget. Okay. We are $36 trillion in debt. If we do nothing, these vital programs are going to collapse, and that would be catastrophic for everyone across the country.
I appreciate that, and I think what you're saying reflects a lot of what many Republicans feel. There is another part to all this. Mr. Musk has no official standing in this country except to be a friend of the president's and seems to be running things. Is that the kind of person that you want to judge whether some of these things should be cleared up, some of these things should be cut back a little bit? Because it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. There seems to the average person, Mike, and you know this, and the way you're talking says that, that a lot of people believe that, and I think that is true. They don't want people getting ripped off for taxpayers' dollars. But you've got a situation where there's things that are just looks like they're being killed, and then of course they pulled back many, many times in the last few weeks. Do you worry about that? Because it's not the way the system usually works.
Well, no, government works at a glacial pace oftentimes, and reforms are very hard to come by because the often used phrase is, well, that's not the way we do things. And that's oftentimes why nothing gets done.
But that's not what I said, though.
But Bill, I'm answering your question, but that is the fundamental problem we're dealing with. We have a $7 trillion budget. Joe Biden increased federal spending by $5 trillion in his first 2 years. You look at our debt, we are $36 trillion in debt. If the position of my Democratic colleagues is that there's no savings to be had anywhere, which, seems to frankly be their position, it's wrong. Yes, I understand the concern about the speed with which changes are being made by the executive. But the fact is, the executive authority lies with the president. That is under our Constitution, the president has the executive authority to oversee and manage the departments and agencies. And he has appointed Elon Musk to serve in his administration to come up with viable savings and efficiencies within every branch and department of the federal government. And as Elon Musk has said, they're going to make mistakes. And yes, I wish they would dot I's and cross T's before pulling the trigger on things. But as they do things, and if they make mistakes, they are acting to fix it. And I'll give you a case in point.
Yeah.
When the World Trade Center Health Fund came into question as part of cuts to the CDC, I immediately reached out to the White House, and they acted swiftly to rectify the situation and made sure that those cuts did not take effect. Ultimately, Congress is going to have to act with any recommendations that come from Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiencies. We are the ones that authorize the spending, and it is ultimately Congress's responsibility to make the necessary changes. If there are savings to be had, to put those into effect. If there are things that are vital programs, to make sure that those are protected. And that is what we are working through with reconciliation and the appropriations process as we move forward. President Trump made clear this week in meeting with Elon Musk and his cabinet officials that Elon's role is to make recommendations. The cabinet officials are the ones responsible for overseeing their departments and agencies. And ultimately, Congress is responsible for the appropriations.
And are you?
And that is how it should work. Right. And certainly as we move forward, that's how it will work.
And will there be friction between perhaps the White House and Congress if that doesn't happen? Because there's the fear among many people.
Of course, we're co-equal branches of government. Of course, there's always going to be times in which you have disagreement. But the objective here is to work through that in an honest way and directly to address any challenges that come up, not just to stomp your feet and scream, or in the case of the Democrats at the joint session, sit on your hands, boo, hiss, yell at, stand up, interrupt, and refuse to applaud for American citizens. I mean, the fact that my Democratic colleagues refused to stand for a 13-year-old boy with cancer who became a Secret Service agent, or mothers of children who were killed by illegal immigrants, or the wife of a slain New York City police officer speaks volumes to how divided we are, and frankly, the blind hatred that some of my colleagues have for the president. You don't have to like him. You don't have to agree with him on everything. It's fine to have disagreement, and we should have robust debate. But the American people spoke in November, and they expect us to work together to address the challenges facing the country. That's my job. That's what I will have done and will continue to do.
Appreciate that. Last question, Congressman. When you were listening to the president speak, because what you're saying, we want people to do it, and you go into, bipartisanship. You say that it's. Listen, a lot of Democrats say you're one of the guys that makes that happen. There was a lot of hatred in that speech as well. What he did to the former president of the United States, I can't believe, I was thinking about you when I heard it, I can't believe that you didn't have some goosebumps about the back of your neck when you heard him talking like that. It was a time when he could have brought the country together, and there wasn't a lot of that.
Look, the tone, unfortunately, was set by my Democratic colleagues before the speech even started. First time ever in history, the Democratic leadership did not escort the President of the United States into the chamber. They refused to stand for the First Lady of the United States. They refused to stand for the cabinet members. That set the tone right off the bat, and then you had Al Green stand and scream at the President from the floor. Look, it was extremely unfortunate. That is not the way any of us should conduct ourselves. There's going to be disagreement. That's okay. That is why we have a democracy. Yep. We should have robust exchanges and free debate. But there also needs to be a level of respect for the American people. They spoke in this past November's election.
We would maybe agree, a lot of people would agree, no matter their politics, that it was not America's finest hour, the entire event. Mike Lawler, Congressman from New York, appreciate you coming on, and as always, with your input. Good luck, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, thanks, Mike.